This happened when I was in college. I was 20 at the time, studying for an upcoming exam in biology. That is, until my roommate busted in my room. She wasn't yelling, but I could see she was drunk by her excitement. I rolled my eyes and sighed. I completely lost focus now. But it was okay. I'd kind of gotten used to her behavior. She was a party girl while I was, well, a nerd. I tried to get back on my reading tracks again, but she patted me on the back and drunkenly giggled before speaking. "Come on, Jasmine. Every time I see you, you're always reading a book." I sighed before speaking. "And every time I see you, you smell of alcohol and vomit." She frowned at me. "How about this? I'll be quiet all week if you come to this party tomorrow at 8. I wanted to say no, but then I thought about it. I mean, I do always work really hard. Besides, she won't barge in like this for the whole week? Sounds too good, I thought to myself, so I nodded and continued to read. We got ready. I hadn't dressed up in ages, so I was kind of excited. The party was loud, filled with drunk people making out, bumping, and dancing. The party was hosted in a basement-like setting, only it was much bigger and had a lot of space. I'm not going to lie, I did have a few drinks. I wasn't drunk, but I was definitely tipsy. So, as my view became tilted, this guy comes out of nowhere and has small talk with me. He was fairly attractive. He didn't seem drunk. We met and exchanged names. From what I remember, he had red dyed hair and blue eyes. He was white and about 6 feet. His name was Luke. We laughed and talked about topics like studying and books and that kind of thing. The talking went on for about a half an hour. He then said, "Hey, I'm going to get another drink. Want anything?" And I said, "Why not? I mean, I'm having fun." So later on, he came back with drinks. And the next thing I remember, we were making out in the corner of the party room. It was so quick, and then he asked me, "Want to go back to my place?" Which I politely declined. I already know what he wants. Besides, I needed to be on campus in the morning. "Come on, I promise it will be fun." I remember that he kept on trying to get me to go, but he gave up after I made it clear I wasn't interested in going to his place. He rolled his eyes angrily and gave me a paper with a number on it. "Fine. If you change your mind, give me a call." He leaned close to me and whispered against my ear. Then he walked out, and the rest of the night was a complete blank. The next day, I woke up inside my college bedroom, on my bed, next to my roommate snoring on her bed as well. As I got up to shower, a paper fell out of my pocket. It was the number, which made me remember that guy. But I had more important things now. I showered then and went to study. I remember reading my book when all of a sudden I felt dizzy. Then I woke up in the bed with police officers and nurses talking next to me. Turns out I had this dangerous allergic reaction that could only be caused from saliva or any bodily fluids that had come from decaying or rotting flesh. Which to my surprise was weird. I hadn't been kissing anyone, let alone ate anything raw. Then I remembered the guy. I told the police about the guy at the party and gave them the number he gave me. A few weeks passed and my allergies went down so I could live my life normally. I just finished my test when my phone rang. I answered it and it was the police. Turns out the guy from the party had 2 dead, decaying women's bodies inside his apartment that he ate. They must have been there for months. My heart dropped. The thought that I made out with someone who ate human flesh, or even worse, was what if I had agreed to come to his place? I may have been one of those bodies.
When I was in the 7th grade, I heard about astral projection for the first time and thought the idea seemed pretty cool. Who wouldn't want an out-of-body experience and travel around the world? Anyways, I've been attempting it for several months to no avail. I did doubt it wasn't real and eventually stopped attempting it. Then one day on a January, I decided to hit the bed at around 7 p.m. to take a nap, and the next second I began to feel I was being pulled out of my body as a strong vibration feeling overcame me, similar to that body feeling you get from a strong nicotine rush. I then was floating in my room and felt a presence right behind me, but didn't think much of it. It wasn't a good presence, more of a demonic one. Despite there being my family in the home awake, I didn't see anyone there, and only the light that illuminated the stairway was on. Everything also had a blue tint to it, and I could see clearly in the dark. I had to swim through the air to be able to move and went through my door and swam my way downstairs. I decided to go up and through the ceiling and then through the roof and explore this new plane of existence. However, as I went through the ceiling, I saw this creature rushing towards the stairs, and it stopped as soon as I stopped moving to see it. I could only see the back of it from the right side of it since it was blocked by a wall, but it had yellow skin, pointy, elongated ears, a tail that's medium-sized, and it appeared to be as tall as I was at the time, 5'6". I stared at it for a few seconds, frozen in fear, and before I knew it, I was awake, back in my bed. I looked at my clock and several minutes had passed by. I don't know what to think of that, but it was an interesting experience.
When I was 8 years old, I didn't have any friends. My mom wouldn't allow me to play outside with the other kids in our neighborhood. I was always alone. The only playmates I had were my cousins and my brother, but it took 3 hours and 25 minutes to get to their houses. One day, my mom let me play outside with the kids in our neighborhood for the first time because she was going somewhere, maybe to work or to run errands. I got my dolls and other toys and was excited to play with the kids outside. When I got there, no one wanted to play with me. The attempt was useless, but then someone approached me. He had puppy eyes and was cute. We quickly became playmates. Even though he was a boy, he would join me for tea parties with my dolls. He also invited me to play with him at his house. But I was confused because his house looked old and abandoned. Like it hadn't been cleaned up for almost 12 years. We decided to go play in his garden. When we got there, I puked. I didn't know why at the time, but for some reason, I was disgusted. He didn't offer me water or anything. He just looked at me grinning and said, "Next time, you're going to sleep here too." 2 weeks after that upsetting experience, I went looking for him. A paper airplane flew to me out of nowhere. I picked it up, and when I opened it, I was shocked, scared, and sad. It was a newspaper clipping. The boy that I played with went missing 9 years ago. I ran to my bedroom, and I saw a shadow through my window. I looked at it closely, and it was the boy. He was smiling. Today, I'm 19 years old, and I still remember that part of my childhood so clearly.
One day, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my mom had gone to my older sister's recital in Georgia, and my dad was at work. He was a pilot for some airline. So she left me and my older brother, who was only 12 at the time, at the sitter's house, which was a few blocks away from my house. My sitter, who I'm going to call Bev, was 19, and she was pretty much the best kind of sitter to a 6 to 7-year-old boy could ask for. She'd let us play games and stay up watching TV, as long as we didn't bother her while she was on the phone with her boyfriend. We were watching TV, and we could hear something scratching the paneling on the side of the house. Naturally, we blew it off as a stray animal, so we continued watching TV. About 30 minutes to an hour later, Bev ran into the living room and locked the front door and shut the blinds. We were curious as to what she was doing. Me and my brother, being kids, got scared and started crying. Then Bev said everything would be okay. It was just a peeping Tom. So she took us upstairs and we went to her parents' room with the Nintendo and some snacks. She said stay put and not to touch anything we didn't bring into the room. Not a minute later after she walked out of the room, we heard a loud crash and glass shattering in the room below us. The sicko had thrown a brick from the walkway through the guest bedroom window and managed to get in. I remember Bev running into the room and pulling us into the closet and telling us we were going to play a game of hide and seek and to be very quiet. She got out of the closet and locked it from the outside latch and disappeared. Several minutes passed and we could hear a grown man screaming, come out wherever you are. I only want to play." Then I heard what sounded like water running in the bathroom across from the closet. Then it shut off. And I heard Bev yelling something at the man. It was something like, "The police are on their way. You better get out of my fucking house now." Then we could hear loud, heavy footsteps sprinting out of the room, and then sirens wailing in the distance. Bev shrieked, and we heard a loud thud on the ground below us. Bev had managed to find an old wooden bat. As the man turned a corner to go out the front door, Bev swung the bat as hard as she could, knocking the man to the floor. Dazed, he got up and tried chasing her outside, but the cops had already arrived and tackled the man on sight. My mom came home immediately and took me, my brother, and Bev back to my house. A few years later, she explained that the man was a known sex offender and had escaped from prison. In the report, he was said to be carrying a rather large knife in his pocket and had a Saturday night special tucked away in the waist of his pants.
It happened last year, 2018, when I was still in my second year of high school. It was earlier March that I was in school. We were just playing some quiz game on my laptop. I connected it to the projector for all of them to see. But then suddenly the school's fire alarm went off. They said this isn't a drill, but rather a maniac just entered our school with a gun. So all of us closed the door and the window to our classroom and switched off the lights. It was all silent, like you could hear a pin drop to the floor. At first I wasn't panicking that much, but it all started to happen when a gunshot was heard from the distance of our room. I can assume that he already knows that we're here. We are the closest room from the entry hall. Every single one of my classmates was crying. I'm the tallest and the oldest student of them all. I'm 16 and some of them are 15 and 14 and another one is 12. So I thought, I'm the oldest. I should protect them. And I was like that. So then I grabbed the fire extinguisher in our room, because every single room in my school has a fire blanket and a fire extinguisher, just in case of a fire. I had a stupid plan inside my head that I'll spray him with the fire extinguisher. So then I opened our room door, and I came across it. He was a middle-aged man wearing a white tank and black slacks. He was holding a .44 Magnum caliber revolver. At first, we were having a quick draw match, like that. He grabbed his gun first and pulls the trigger. I can feel my heart beating fast, and just then he aimed the gun at me, but it didn't shoot at all. He forgot to cock his gun, so then it's my chance to hit him with the fire extinguisher and knock him out. After that, the police arrived and every student was reunited with their family. And still, I'm wondering, what could have happened if he didn't forget to cock his gun and shoot me first?
My name is Magda, and I'm 26 years old. I work in an office in the city. On the weekends, I used to love to get away from all the hustle and bustle and take a trip to the countryside. Luckily, I have a cottage in a small village which is located right at the edge of the forest. How I used to love to get out of the city and spend the weekend in my little cottage. Why did I stop? Well, I'll tell you. After a hard week at work, I needed to rest, so I decided to get out of town. I went home, packed my bags, threw them in the trunk, and drove off. When I arrived in the village, it was late in the evening and I was tired from the long drive. I went straight to bed and fell asleep quickly. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by the sound of my car alarm going off. I looked out the window, but there was nobody in sight. I found my car keys, pressed the button to shut off the alarm, and the awful noise stopped. I laid back down and tried to fall asleep, All of a sudden, the alarm went off again. I didn't feel like getting up, so I just grabbed my keys and pressed the button once more. Everything was peaceful and quiet again. However, 5 minutes later, the alarm went off a third time. Once or twice could have been an accident, but now I was wondering what was going on. Could someone be playing tricks on me in the middle of the night? I got up again and pressed the button to turn off the alarm. But this time, I didn't lay back down. I stood at the curtains and watched. After a few minutes, I saw something by the light of the moon. A shadow emerged from the bushes and slowly approached the car. I could just about make out the shape. It was something tall, skinny, and black. The figure reached out with its long, thin arms and knocked on the car. The alarm went off again, and quick as a flash, the dark figure retreated back into the bushes. At that moment, I realized what was going on and began shaking with fear. I turned off the alarm and continued to watch. The thing emerged from the bushes again, slid silently over to the gates, threw a hand through them, and removed the partition holding the gates closed. I was paralyzed with fear, and I couldn't move. My mind was overcome by panic thoughts. What was it? What did it want from me? What was it doing? Would it ever go away? A shiver ran through my body, from my head down to my toes. My mouth was dry and my heart was beating fast. I was so tense, I was gritting my teeth and clenching my hands into fists. I regained control of myself and ran down the stairs as fast as my legs could carry me to the ground floor. I wanted to look for something I could use to protect myself. However, just as I was about to switch on the lights, I suddenly froze in my tracks. The dark figure was at the window. It was pressed up against the glass, staring in, looking to see whether or not there was someone home. I immediately ducked down behind the sofa and peered out. That's when I realized what all those tricks with the car were for. It was trying to lure its victim outside. I couldn't take my eyes off its hideous face. Its skin was the color of ash and covered with wrinkles. Its eyes were small, beady, and completely black. Instead of it having a nose, there were 2 ragged holes. It didn't have any lips, just 2 rows of sharp, yellow teeth. When it breathed, it was so heavy and hoarse that it was misting up the window. I just knew it wasn't going to go away. After standing at the window for a few moments, I heard a rustling noise as it came to the front door. I watched as it tried to push its fingers through the gap under the door. The handle began to twitch wildly up and down. The creature emitted a chilling sound. It was not like a human voice. It was a deep, beastly growl, like an angry dog chewing on a bone. I knew that if it heard me, it would keep trying until it found a way to get into the house. I crouched down behind the sofa, hiding in the shadows and desperately trying not to make a sound. Tears began involuntarily streaming down my face, no matter how much I tried to stop them. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples, and I was shaking like a leaf, just waiting for it to end. I don't know how long I cowered there. I must have been passed out. When I woke up and looked out the window, the creature was gone. The door was still in place, and everything seemed secure. I've never been so relieved in all my life. I ran upstairs and looked out the window. It was light outside, and there was no sign of anything wrong. Taking a chance, I grabbed my keys, and without stopping to collect any of my things, I ran out to the car. I jumped in, locked the doors, and drove away from the village as fast as I could. I didn't stop driving until I got back to the city. When I got back to my apartment, I turned on the radio and heard a news report. The announcer said that, in the village, the dead bodies of 2 girls had been discovered. Their corpses had been mutilated and dumped in a swamp. I guess the creature found what it was looking for. I don't want to, but I am curious to know. What would have happened if I didn't make the right decision of sprinting?
Years ago, when I was in the 5th grade, my friends and I were walking home from school when we noticed some of the other kids laughing very loudly at something and running away like they were disgusted. We looked back, and they were laughing at this woman who was walking behind us. We didn't know why, because we saw her every day when we were walking home from school. We just never spoke with her, or we never even seen her up close. We moved closer to see what was so funny, and we definitely noticed what the other kids were making ruckus about. This was a man dressed in a miniskirt with high heels on. The other kids were throwing sticks and rocks at it, but he never responded. He just smiled while he was walking. A few days later, I just so happened to be watching the news, and I saw the same guy's face on the news. My friend who lives around the corner was getting her mail when she saw the man across the street watching her. He waved and he started skipping across the street like a little girl while loudly asking her, "Do you remember me?" She was one of the kids that threw rocks at him. She shut her door as he started running full speed toward her house while wearing a wig, miniskirt, heels, and a woman's tank top. He started banging on her door until she called the police. He was caught within minutes. Anything could have happened to us that day, with this guy roaming our neighborhood. But luckily, nothing ever happened to any of the kids that I knew.
This story happened when I was 18 years old and a senior in high school. It was an ordinary night. My dad worked the night shift, so we all decided to sleep in my parents' room. I was with my younger brother, who was 15 years old at the time, my younger sister, who was 11 years old, and my mom. My parents' room was a small, purple, square-shaped room, which also had a bathroom. The bathroom's door was across from the bed. My younger brother and I slept on my parents' bed while my mom and my younger sister slept on the floor. Before sleeping, we all had a short conversation, and after that, we went to sleep at 9 p.m. At 2 a.m., I was awakened by a strange sensation. As I opened my eyes, I had my eyes fixed on the bathroom door, which was cracked open. To my surprise, I noticed a black figure, which looked exactly like my younger brother. The figure stood there with his arms crossed, watching me. However, his eyes were shut. At that moment, I froze. I couldn't move from the bed, and I was scared that if he opened his eyes, he would have red or bloodshot eyes. I decided to quietly turn my head to the other side of the bed to see if it was indeed my brother. My heart sunk to my stomach when I realized that my brother was sleeping right next to me. So many thoughts kept racing through my head. Who is this person? Why is he here? How could he look exactly like my brother? I tried as hard as possible to sleep and ignore what I saw. A few minutes later, after opening and closing my eyes, I was shocked to see that the figure was now standing above me, still looking right into my eyes with his eyes shut. My eyes were wide open from the shock. I felt like I was going to die from a heart attack. I felt as if he was starting to open his eyes, which scared me and caused me to close my eyes and force myself to sleep. Forcing myself to sleep worked, and the next thing I knew, it was morning. When I woke up, I headed to the living room and saw my mom. After holding it inside for a bit, I gave up and told my mom about the incident. I almost froze when she said she saw the same exact figure and witnessed what happened. It was terrifying. We both saw the same black figure that looked exactly like my brother. It was as if he was my brother's twin. We lived in that house for 2 more years until we finally moved out. After the move, we told my dad about this story because he doesn't like hearing creepy stories, so we kept it a secret until we moved. He surprised us by saying that we were not alone. He saw some strange things in that house as well. When you think of Counter-Strike Global Offensive, the last thing you'd think of was a horror story. But yet, here I am. It was the summer of 2014 and I was bored and home alone, so naturally I hopped on CSGO. I went to Dust Online to play some casual. It wasn't a very busy lobby, there was about 5 people on each side. I joined Terrorists, where I quickly discovered the only other person with a mic was a guy whose name was something like Smarties McFlurry. He sounded a lot older than me, I was 14 at the time. His name was Dave, and we got along well and we played good together since we had the same number of skill. We eventually played more CSGO together and then friended each other on Steam. After that, he asked for some of my social media, and I gave him my Discord and Snapchat. Then on CSGO, Dave suddenly said he had to leave and we could play more tomorrow. So I got off and watched some TV and eventually went to sleep on the couch. I was home alone for the night. At like 1 a.m., I awoke and got a glass of water. Then I heard a Snapchat notification from my phone. Curious as to who was sending snaps at this time of night, I picked it up and saw it was from Dave. I opened it, and it was a picture of my front lawn and house. The phone and the glass of water fell from my hands to the floor, and my heart began to race. I was suddenly frozen, as if rooted to the spot. The darkness around me seemed to become thicker, and I swear I was seeing shadows all around me. Then I heard a knock at the glass. I turned to the back window, and there he was, the Dave guy, who looked a lot older and creepier than me. Without thinking, I ran to the back door, locked it. I also locked the front door. I could hear him calling to me through the window. Then I proceeded to run to the only windowless room, the bathroom. I stayed in there for about an hour, shaking and fearing the worst. I dreaded hearing the sound of Dave calling me again, a knock at the door, or even footsteps outside. I don't know how long it was before I fell asleep. The next morning, my parents arrived home, and I hesitated to tell them about my experience. I knew they would drop shit on me, but it wasn't just that. I was questioning whether or not I was dreaming when the Dave guy appeared at my house. I knew I had not been dreaming playing CSGO with him though. However, when I checked my phone, it was like he didn't exist. He was not on my friends list in CSGO, his Steam account was gone, his Discord was gone, and even his Snapchat was gone, all deleted. To this day, I still question my sanity about whether or not this Dave guy who I played CSGO with really existed. I know for sure we had chatted on the game, on Discord and on Snapchat, but had he really come to my house? And why were all of his online accounts deleted? I really don't know.
I was a big Tinder guy a few years ago. Everywhere I went, I would update my location and then update, my body count. Then I quit doing Tinder and stuck with Instagram. I know they're completely different, and IG has a bunch of fake accounts. So I saw this girl commenting on all of my friends' pictures. Then she commented on mine. I also saw my friends replying, so I figured she was a real person because I looked on her page and she had way more followers than people she was following. So I DM'd her. I definitely thought she wasn't going to reply, but she did within an hour. We talked for maybe 2 or 3 weeks and we made it official. She was pretty, had a degree, and a good job, as she said. I felt she was out of my league and too perfect. Every day she posted new photos, and I told my friends about her and they seemed pretty jealous, except for my friend Ryan. He said I was stupid because I never spoke with her, and I only messaged her. She invited me over because she said she can cook. Ryan told me to don't go. The rest of my friends said don't have any kids, and they would laugh. So I went over there, but not without Ryan calling me a clown first. The GPS said she lived about an hour away. When I first started to talk to her, she told me that she lived in a nice neighborhood. But when I got there were people everywhere and the neighborhood was not that nice. When I stopped at the stop sign at the corner, people walked up to my windows and asked me what do I need. But I pulled off really fast and got to the house. It was a duplex, so I messaged her and she said to come up the stairs. It was about 9 at night and people were everywhere just standing around. I knocked on the door and I was definitely excited. The door opened and to my surprise, it was a bald-headed white guy with a patchy beard, tattoos everywhere including his head with a tank top on. I asked was Lisa home and he said, yeah, "Come in." When I walked in, I was immediately hit with a musty smell mixed with cheese. He told me to sit down, and he sat down across from me on the couch. He said she'll be out soon. He asked me did I want something to drink, and I said, yeah, sure. When I got up, I texted her, can she come out, please? She immediately said yes. The man came back in with 2 cups of juice, one for him and one for myself. Then I noticed that he put a phone down on the table next to him. So I acted like I sneezed and got some on my arm. Then I asked for a tissue. He went to get some tissue and he left his phone like I thought he would. I texted her back, and to my horror, the phone rang. I looked on the caller ID and it was my name. I heard him coming back. He came back and we sat there for about a minute. And then the phone rang again because he never checked the message that I sent. He looked at the phone. I looked at the phone. Then we looked at each other. I postured up, and he calmly said, I guess you caught me. Then out of nowhere, he lunged toward me, attempting to grab me. I punched him, and he fell on his face. I ran out of there so fast, and I never looked back. Yeah, I called the cops. And when they got there, the man was still knocked out. After that, I never went on dates with people that I met online again. This story is totally true. It happened to me when I was about 4 years old. My dad used to really like going on vacation with me and my family. One time, we went to what I think was Big Bear, but I'm not sure. Anyways, we rented a cabin. I don't remember much, but I remember the inside of the cabin was beautiful. The furniture was all colorful and decorated in Christmas colors, but it was around Christmas time. It was very roomy, and it was 2 floors and had its own den, kitchen, and bedroom. We arrived during the day, and everything seemed normal. When night came, however, we started hearing noises. It sounded like someone was shaking the front doorknob trying to get in. I was the first to notice, and I told my mom. But she didn't believe me. Then she saw it too. For a couple of minutes, the front doorknob just kept shaking by itself, and we were too afraid to go look out the door. Then we heard another noise. It sounded like steel hitting steel. Then it stopped. My dad was afraid someone was trying to break in, so we packed up all of our things so we can leave. But before we did, my dad called the police and asked them to come search the premises. We exited out the back door because the noises were coming from the front. Our car was down the hill from the back of the cabin. I fell asleep in the car and woke up the next morning in a small rinky-dink motel room that was nothing as roomy and beautiful as the cabin. I was so bummed, but I was quickly relieved we had left because later that day, we found out who was making those noises. The police had arrived there and searched the outside and found nothing. Then they went inside and found a man that had 2 hooks instead of hands. He had been twisting the doorknob with his hook. Then he clashed his hooks together, and that's what we heard was it still on steel. We found out that about 5 minutes after we left the cabin, he successfully broke in and started searching for us. The police found bodies stashed in the upstairs closet. When we were on our way home from the motel, we stopped at a gas station near the cabin where the madman had tried to break in. My mom knew it was a bad idea, but my dad told her to relax. The cops took care of that guy. He's nowhere near us. We all went into the little shop to buy some candy and snacks. We were quite surprised when we came out of the shop and headed back to our car. There was a note on the hood that read, "There's more of us. See you soon." It's safe to say that we never went back to that cabin again.
I was born in 1984. This incident was from 1989. I was 5 years old then. I'm a guy, the middle child of 5 siblings. It was late 1989. when my mom was giving birth to our youngest sister. My mom was having labor, and my dad and a family friend were taking her to the hospital of our town. My eldest sister and I were left alone at home. I have no clue about ghosts and hauntings by that time. I wasn't sure how much time has passed since they left for the hospital, but I guessed it's about midnight or just before it, when my sister fell asleep. I was sitting beside her on the couch. I am sure I was wide awake and watching my elder sis sleeping. The couch was just by the window, and the window was high above the ground. There's no way anyone could climb up the wall. It was then, at that exact moment, that I saw a hand on the outside of the window pane. The hand of a baby, from the wrist upward, with the palm facing me. Maybe I was too young to get scared, or I didn't know how to react. I'm not sure. I just kept staring at the hand. At that time, I thought that the hand was of my to-be-born younger babies. I can't tell what exactly happened after that. What I'm sure of was that my parents came home the next morning with our new baby sister. I told my mom about the thing after I was 25 years old. But I've got chills when I think about that night. I wonder why I didn't get scared or horrified. Maybe I was too young, as I've said before. I don't know. I'm sure I saw what I saw. If that night was not then, but one of these nights, I'd be screaming my lungs out or froze to death. I have 3 sisters, Crystal, Kiara, and Melissa. I'm the youngest and only boy. Growing up, we lived in a haunted house. In fact, the neighborhood was haunted. All the neighbors had experiences. Apparently, it was all built over a military grave site, but I'm not sure how true that is. This was years ago. I was about 5, I think, and my sisters were around their early teens. Our cousin, Vincent, who we call Vincy, was staying over. He's the same age as my sisters. We used to play hide and seek with all the lights in the house turned off, apart from any room our parents were in. So this night was going great. The only source of light was a flashlight that the seeker had. Crystal was usually found quickly because she had, and still has, really long curly red hair, and it almost glowed bright orange in the light. Kiara has long straight blonde hair, so she was found quickly too. But Melissa and I have black hair, so we could blend in better. However, this night, Kiara was the seeker. She found us fairly quickly and only had Vincy to find. So she went to our parents' room and shined the light inside. Our parents had 2 white wardrobes that were attached on either side of a white dressing table, with a mirror on top of it. Kiara could see one of the wardrobe doors was slightly opened, and inside of it, in the darkness, she could see eyes staring out at her. She laughed and shouted, "Found you, Vincy!" But the eyes didn't move. They just stared at her. "I see you, Vincy!" She laughed again. Suddenly, on the opposite side of the room, the curtains of the window flew open, and Vincy jumped from the window ledge laughing. Kiara looked at him in confusion. But I thought. Suddenly the confusion turned to fear when she looked back at the wardrobe. The eyes were still there, wide and staring at Vincy, but then slowly looked back in her direction. Kiara screamed and quickly turned on the room light, and they could both now see that the wardrobe was empty. Nobody hiding, no pets, no boxes, nothing. Hide and seek in the dark soon became a memory after that. This happened a few weeks ago. I live in California and have always been good friends with this kid named Ethan. We had all the same interests, so we got along great. But that's besides the point. There's this old abandoned house a few blocks away that has been vacant for years. I have no idea why it was never fixed and sold. The point is, it's abandoned. All the neighborhood kids are always telling rumors about the place, and to be honest with you, I never thought they could be true. The house was creepy as fuck though. So one night, while Ethan was staying at my house for the night, we decided to sneak out at like 1 a.m. to explore the place. We brought along our phones for flashlights and to record. So we rode our bikes down the block and found the house. It was 2 stories high and made of brick, with broken windows and an overgrown lawn. Basically all the natural traits of an abandoned house. Ethan and I hid our bikes in a bush and went around the backside. Oddly enough, the back door was unlocked. One of the rumors is that local homeless people, drug addicts, and gang members all hang out here. So the fact that someone seemed to have been here kind of freaked us out. Inside, it smelled like shit. It was so dark that if it weren't for our flashlights, we definitely wouldn't have been able to see anything. We walked through what appeared to be a kitchen, around through a living room, into a foyer. Just as we were about to go upstairs, there was a sudden, loud thump. Ethan and I both jumped and stood frozen. Dude, I think someone's up there, I whispered to Ethan. Yeah, no kidding, he said back. Let's check it out. Dude, are you fucking crazy? I said. But Ethan either didn't hear or ignored me, as he was already halfway up the stairs. As much as I did not want to go up there, I decided to anyways because there was no way in hell I was staying down in the dark alone. We got upstairs and heard an identical thump down the hall. Holding up my phone to continue recording, I reluctantly followed Ethan down there. We approached the doorway and glanced through to see someone standing by the window. It was so dark, all we could make out was a brown sweater he was wearing. We knew he had to know we were here, because we had already shown the flashlight on him. Ethan began to cautiously walk towards the guy. I stood back by the doorway. Ethan walked up to the guy, strained his body to look at his face, and screamed. He shoved the guy, who fell to the floor, stiff like a statue, and grabbed my shirt collar as he tugged me away from there. I dropped my phone as we nearly trampled each other running down the stairs and out the back door. We got on our bikes and pedaled fast as possible back home. Apparently, when Ethan had walked up to the stiff man, he realized that the man was some sort of taxidermied human, with black sockets where his eyes had been taken out. At the same time, he heard a crack in the floorboards from across the room and saw the silhouette of a man huddled in a dark corner watching him. We had the nerve to go back to the house a few days later to try and find my phone, but it was gone, as the taxidermied human and whoever was in that house. We didn't dare report it to the police for fear of getting busted for breaking and entering and sneaking out at night. I know, I guess that sounds stupid now. Ethan and I are still great friends in high school, and this memory is still one we will never forget for as long as we live.
A few years ago, while I was in high school, the deep web was becoming very popular. I never really got into it until my friend told me about it because he was into that weird stuff. One day after school, I had nothing to do, so I went onto the browser Tor. I didn't really see much, so I called my friend over so he could help me out. Once he got to my house, we started searching more and more. We saw a lot of drugs and illegal weapons, stuff like that. Then he clicked on a link that was in a chat room, and the link said, "Watch this." As we're sitting there, We were just staring at the screen that went from black to the outside of a building within a few seconds. And out of nowhere, a sticky note that said, "Want to see something cool?" So then I typed, "Yeah, sure." What was weird was the guy wouldn't type. He just showed sticky notes in the camera. And he also never spoke. All of a sudden, the camera started moving toward the building that it was facing. As we're watching him move toward the building, we noticed that the building was in our neighborhood. Then he quit moving and put another sticky note that said LOL. That kind of creeped me out. And then a person entered the building, which was eerily dark. The camera stopped at a padlocked door and then unlocked it and opened it. The camera moved toward the back of this dark room, and there was a dog bowl on the floor. Now at this point, the camera was only facing the dog bowl. A few moments later, whoever the person was that was holding the camera put something in the bowl that looked like just slop. Honestly, it looked like feces. Then you hear another door open and a girl crying in the background, along with a chain dragging. This girl shows up in the camera crying with a chain around her neck. And the guy shoved her face in the bowl and puts a sticky note in front of the camera that said, "Cool, right?" Then the screen goes black. We sat there for about 10 minutes in disbelief, but the stream was still live. Then out of nowhere, the camera was back on. Then it was in the corner of my street. Then another sticky note that said 545 East 99th Street off of St. Clair. That was my address. Then another sticky note that said open the door. We sat there confused, then out of nowhere, a knock at the door. I grabbed my phone, jumped up, and we both ran to the back door. Then we heard a knock at that door right before I grabbed the handle. At that point, we had someone at the back door and someone at the front door knocking. We were stuck. Critical thinking wasn't my strength at that point. We ran upstairs, called the cops, and locked ourselves in my room. The cops showed up, but no one was outside. Only items that the cops found were 100 sticky notes, all with my address written on them. I told the cops about the building with the girl, and they found it. The girl was 14 and had been missing for 5 weeks. We moved out of that house within a week. But I would never visit the deep or the dark web again.
One day, when I was in the 6th grade, on a rainy day, I was walking home. On my walk, which is about a mile or so long, I had to walk through a cemetery. Not a stereotypical, shabby, haunted one, but one that had many people walking through and was usually full of maintenance employees. I remember walking by a group of them sitting on benches on a break. I thought nothing of it, as he stood up and started walking at a fair distance. After a bit, I looked back at him and he looked down quickly. He was in the same baby blue uniform as the others and had a gray beard, but I made out a name tag, Frank P. As the other workers faded from sight, he was still behind me. I began to worry. A moment later, he called out, "It's wet, huh?" in a friendly voice. I chuckled politely and agreed. My worries increased a second later when I walked out and he was still behind me. I was close to my house now and it started to pour. My house in sight, I started jogging to get there. I glanced back and I saw the man, visibly angry, start running. As my house got closer, I began to sprint. I didn't look back as I slung the key out of my backpack and opened the door. I looked behind me. I saw the man in the middle of the street. I walked over to the phone and dialed 911. Before I called, I looked out the window. He was gone. I told my mom what happened when she got home. She didn't believe me. That night, I couldn't sleep. There was lightning outside, and I could see occasional shadows from the flashes through my window in my living room. I lay watching the flashes when I saw a strange outline. I looked closer and saw an outline of a man. I stood up and walked out of my room. I walked into the living room. It was completely dark outside. I stood in the doorway and waited. A car's headlight illuminated the pale, shallow face of Frank P. I ran into my room and locked the door. I never saw him after that night. But whenever I see that baby blue uniform, I think back to that night and that haunting image of a skeletal, unnatural face of Frank P.
This is a true horrifying incident that happened to me when I was very young. The year was 2007, and I was an 8-year-old girl studying at a primary school. The school was old, and it was built after the war and Japanese invasion in my country. I heard that there were Japanese army men and local people killed on the land brutally. And many teachers and students claim that they have encountered paranormal activity. Although I've never seen anything paranormal at the school, this place still gave me a creepy vibe. My class was located on the 2nd floor, just beside the girls' bathroom. The chilling part is, we could see an old cemetery park from there before entering the bathroom. One day, when I was studying in my class, I wanted to pee, so I asked the teacher's permission and went to the bathroom. I got into the first stall and locked the door. There was no light or anyone in there. It was just me. Everything was silent until suddenly, someone banged and kicked the door that was in front of me. I was in shock and froze for the first seconds. I don't know why, but I didn't scream for my life. I just quickly pushed against the door so the person wouldn't break in. After a few minutes, the banging stopped. I waited for a few more minutes and opened the door. There was no one in there. I walked out, ready to go back to my classroom. Then, I saw a student with broad shoulders and chocolate skin standing opposite of my direction. He was looking at me with a smile on his face. I froze because he was one of my classmates, and he actually sat near me. I think, after he saw me go out of the bathroom, he followed me, and that was him inside. I quickly returned to my classroom and didn't speak of anything about it to anyone. The student soon went in and sat down quietly. I cannot recall his name, but I still remember this incident even now. I will never forget this horrifying experience. I wonder what would have happened to me if I didn't lock the door, or if he had successfully broke in that day.
This happened a few months ago when my family and I were driving back from my aunt's house in Carmel. The sun was slowly starting to set as we continued driving. As my mom started to get tired of driving, my dad spotted a nice-looking hotel that was pushed back in the forest. My mom pulled over and we walked towards the hotel. The place seemed nice, but I had a bad feeling about the hotel. My dad asked the lady at the front desk if there were any spare rooms that we could stay in for the night. The lady surprisingly said yes, but that our shower was broken and that unfortunately they wouldn't be able to fix it. But she said we could use the community showers on the 2nd floor. We took the elevator up to our room and set down our things. I decided before I went to bed that I would use the community showers. As I walked to the showers, I realized that they were much different than normal showers. To start off, there was a door connecting the boys' community showers to the girls' community showers. Secondly, instead of shower curtains, they had glass doors. So much for privacy. As I looked around, I realized the showers were completely empty. I thought to myself, if I took a quick shower, then I wouldn't have to worry about anyone walking in. I hopped in and washed myself. As time went on, the glass started to get very foggy and I couldn't see anything outside. I heard the door that connected the boys' showers to the girls' showers open. Why the hell would a boy want to come in here? Since I couldn't see anything, I decided to wipe my hand on the glass to get rid of the fog. As I did that, I saw a homeless man in his mid-40s with greasy hair, with his face directly on the glass looking at me with a smirk. As I looked down, I saw he was holding a large kitchen knife. I screamed and I opened the glass door as fast as I could, knocking the guy to the ground. I quickly grabbed a towel and ran out. I ran to our room and told my parents what happened. They immediately called the police and they arrived and searched the showers. They found him knocked out in the same position I had knocked him out in. Apparently, he was a registered sex offender and even went as far as to raping a girl my age. They arrested him and I'm not sure what they did after that. This story still terrifies me to this day, and I never went back to the hotel in fear that I might see him again.
My name is Victor, and I'm 23 years old. I have a story that happened to me when I was 17 years old. I work as a carpenter at a local building company, and this happened at the period when I was a trainee for the same company. We were renovating a very old apartment building from around the 1960s that was going to be school classrooms for a school that had bought the building. As many carpenters, we were working on Friday, which basically means that we started earlier the rest of the week so we could go home early on Fridays, which means it was a lot of very early mornings. So one day, I was on my way to work at about 4:30 in the morning and was walking the usual way to my bus. It was about 1 kilometer. It was through the block I was living on and then through a small path in the forest, about 200 meters. By this time in the morning, it was still pitch black because it was winter and I live in Sweden, so the path through the forest was like a black hole. So I grabbed my phone and put the flashlight on, an old iPhone 4S by the way, and began walking the small path. About halfway on the path, I heard a crackling noise from my right and flashed my light in the direction and saw nothing. I just figured it was an animal or something. At the end of the path, I heard the crackling noise again, but this time it was much closer. I had always been a little paranoid in the dark, but was trying to get over it. But I began walking a little faster anyway, keeping an eye behind me the whole time. When I arrived at the bus station, I sat down, waiting for the bus, and was saying to myself that I was a coward for being so paranoid about a small sound I heard. I could see the forest I walked through from the bus station because it was only about 50 meters from the station. And when I looked at the path, I saw a man standing behind a tree right under a street light about 10 meters to the right of the path, and he was clearly watching me. He was wearing black pants and an old light blue, almost pastel-colored jacket, like it was from the 80s. I felt a bit sick when I realized he was watching me, even though it was only for about 20 seconds before I saw the bus arriving from around the corner. I immediately felt relief when I saw the bus. So I stepped on the bus, and it was as usual completely empty. I sat at the back of the bus and looked back at the forest to see if the man was still there, but he wasn't. When the bus began to take off, I heard a thud right beside my window. I quickly looked at the side and saw an arm reaching up to my window waving at me, and the arm was wearing a light blue jacket. I didn't have time to see his face because he was wearing a hood, and the bus had already taken off. On the way down to downtown, I tried not to think about the man, but it was so hard because it was so weird, and something like that had never happened to me before. I eventually got off the bus at my bus stop and began walking to the building where I had my working clothes and my gear. It was really close to my bus stop, so it only took me maybe about 5 minutes to walk there. When I arrived at the door to the building, I grabbed my key and was about to put it in the keyhole when I saw in the corner of my eye, peeking out from the building's corner, that man in the light blue jacket standing, looking at me. I quickly unlocked the door, ran inside, locked it behind me. After that, it was 2 more doors. Both needed an access card, so nobody without the card could get inside. After the first door, it was a long hallway. To the left, only lit up by a few lights in the roof, and a ring in front of you. It was the second door that led to my locker in the coffee room. I ran as fast as I could. I was shaking at this time. There was no way I could think of how he could have got down here so fast. I put on some coffee and changed to my working clothes. It was completely quiet in the room. It felt like hours before my coworkers showed up. When they finally showed up, I felt the best feeling in a long time. When it was time to get started with working, we began walking towards the elevator that led up to the top floor, which we were currently working on. When we arrived at the top floor, I realized I forgot my helmet in the locker. So I took the elevator down, went through the 2 doors, and got my helmet, and was making my way back up to the others. When I had opened the first door and was standing in the dark hallway, I froze. I heard someone whispering my name from the back of the hallway. I looked down the hallway and saw the same man, the same light blue jacket. He was standing there looking at me. Then he said something I will never forget. "You look so peaceful when you sleep, Victor," he said in a deep but shaking voice. I felt my whole world shatter when he said that. Then I ran for it. I opened the door and slammed it behind me. I ran to the elevator and smashed the button to the top floor. It felt like I was going 100 floors before I got to the top. I ran to the others and told them what happened. They just laughed at me and thought I was silly, saying that nobody can get in there without a card. I planned to call the police, but I didn't for some reason. Probably because I didn't want to look like a coward in front of the others. Eventually, I never saw that man again. I don't know if I was hallucinating or he was really there. I have no idea. But I never walked the same path to my bus again, and I always sleep with my curtains down, even to this day.
I was 10 years old, and I was home alone. But that wasn't a big deal because we lived in a small city. My mom and dad were at my grandma's house. I couldn't go because I was sick. It was around 9 p.m. when I was about to go to sleep. My room was really small, and it only had one window facing my bed. That window to me was kind of scary, because when you're a little kid, your imagination can sometimes go wild. At that time, it wasn't my imagination, though. Like I said, I was about to go to bed when I heard a loud scream coming from outside. It was really scary, but I tried to be quiet so I could listen to what was going on outside. Nothing was happening, though. It was really quiet, like nothing had happened at all. Quieter than normal, actually. Some time had passed, and everything seemed okay, so I just laid down and tried to sleep. 1 hour later, I heard that loud scream again, but this time, it seemed to be closer. I froze. I was so freaked out I couldn't even move. 30 minutes later, again, the same scream. At that point, I was about to cry. I don't know why, but that scream wasn't just a scream. It was at this high pitch, and it was just so creepy. Finally, 15 minutes later, I saw something at that window. It was a really skinny woman, and she seemed so happy for some reason. She was smiling, and her smile was so big and creepy. When I saw her, I started crying, and she started screaming again. I was horrified. She was just looking at me, smiling and screaming for the whole night. The next morning, my parents came back home, and I told them everything. They called the police, and the police found out that my window, that was facing my bed, was broken. But it didn't seem like it was broken with some sort of weapon, but as if it were broken by a really high pitch.
I was 10 at the time this happened. I loved my bedroom, since it had a TV, a bed, and a closet with my computer on my desk. One night when I was sleeping, I heard a noise coming from my closet, which kind of woke me up. I didn't mind it at all because I was still trying to fall back asleep to go to school tomorrow. 3 hours later, after I woke up and ate breakfast, I was getting ready to pack my bag, which was in my bedroom, for school. When I got in my room and packed my bag, I looked at the window and saw some tall black figure with a hoodie outside of my bedroom window. My heart dropped. And when I said, "Who in the world is that?" the figure ran away. I didn't see the figure's face since he was wearing a black hoodie, and it was a little dark outside since it was 5 a.m. in the morning. After I came back from school, I was on my phone researching for my school project. Suddenly, I heard a loud tap on the window. It was that figure again, and this time I saw his face. He was a man in his late 40s. He had wrinkly skin and had black hair. He smiled at me and said, "Hey, want some candy? Come outside of your house and I'll give you some." He laughed and waited for me to come outside. He ran to the front door and made a mistake by standing there because my dad was going to go to work, and he opened the front door and yelled at him to get the hell off his property or he'll call the police. I rushed to my dad and told him he'd been outside of my bedroom window stalking me. He was about to call the police when he realized he didn't want me to get scared that I was going to get kidnapped or something. So he said he would install security cameras. The only reason why I didn't scream when he was outside of my bedroom window is because that I thought it was one of my friends trying to study with me. But I thought to myself, why the hell would any of my friends want to study at 5 a.m. in the morning? And none of my friends were really that tall. That night, I heard someone laughing in my closet. I didn't open my eyes, but I was scared to death, since I heard that he was scratching the bedroom closet with something that sounded kind of like a knife. I waited a minute or two until I built up my courage to make a run for it and screamed for my life while I ran to my parents' bedroom and locked the door. I explained to them what happened, and there was someone in my closet. My mom called 911, and the guy was saying stuff like, "Come out, and I won't make your parents watch as I stab you." And that was the thing that made me so scared, because my brain was alerting me that he did have a knife. Seconds later, we heard sirens, and me and my parents heard the police bust the door yelling, "Police, drop your weapon and put your hands up." Me and my parents were relieved that he was gone. I was very lucky that my closet was far away from my bed. It turned out that the guy was a crazy mental guy who escaped from his mental hospital by stabbing the security guards and breaking out. From now on, my parents have set up security cameras in each and every room and also outside. Who knows what would have happened to me if I didn't hear him laughing in my closet? Would I have been stabbed to death? Or what if he was hiding under my bed? Since that day, I still don't know how he got in my parents' house. Maybe my mom or dad forgot to lock the front door. Or he got in from my bedroom window.
When I was 19 years old in 1985 on New Year's Eve, a bunch of my friends and I went to a rooftop bar of a hotel. About a half hour before midnight, I ran down to my car because I had forgotten my camera. I figured I would have plenty of time to get back up there and find my friends. I grabbed my camera and I got into an elevator all by myself. About halfway up, the elevator started shaking and it stopped completely. I was trapped. I have always had a problem with confined spaces, so this was not an ideal situation for me. After a few minutes, everything went silent that was going on outside. Then out of nowhere, the elevator lights went out, and I started to hear children laughing. But this was not the type of place where children would be. My heart started beating faster and faster and harder. Then all of a sudden, I passed out. As I woke up, I noticed that I could not move or talk. I thought to myself, not sleep paralysis again. Then the lights started to flicker on and off, and then all of a sudden, I see a black figure to the left of me in the corner of the elevator, crouching down, smiling at me. I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. I tried to move, but I couldn't. A guy came over the loudspeaker and told me there was an electrical short and that he would have me out soon. There's a camera in the elevator, so to the security guard it looked like I was just laying there. I guess they figured I was drunk being that it's New Year's. Anyways, every attempt to scream or move, that figure would just start laughing at me and pointing. This whole time the lights are flickering. Then all of a sudden, I can hear the huge crowds counting down for New Year's. 10. The dark figure is staring at me, and now with a menacing smile, with 10 fingers up. 9. He's still looking at me with 9 fingers up, and he's moving closer. 8. He was still looking at me with 8 fingers up, and he's closer. 7. The same thing. 6. The same thing. 5. The same thing. 4. He's drooling, and he's much closer. 3. He's closer. 2. He was closer. Then the lights quit flickering, and it was pitch black. Then all of a sudden, outside went silent again. I felt breathing in my right ear. And then out of nowhere I hear 1. I couldn't breathe. The light started to flicker again, and then the figure was on my chest. And all of a sudden it was gone. And I can talk and move again. Usually when I have sleep paralysis, something bad happens. Once I got out of the elevator an hour later, I found out that there was a brawl during the countdown on the rooftop bar that I was at, and 4 people were killed by some maniac who was waiting until the end of the countdown to start hacking up people with a machete. Ever since then, I have not had a sleep paralysis episode.
My name is Yusuf. I'm 21 years old. A few weeks ago, my parents decided to go to Lebanon for a few days while I stayed home. I was happy to have a few days to myself, so I decided to drive to the lake which my family went camping at when I was small. It was remote, surrounded by trees, and barely anyone goes there. I decided to stay for one night though. As I got there, I decided to dare myself into skinny dipping since I was alone. To be honest, it was quite refreshing and relaxing. As it was getting dark, I took out some firewood to dry up with a campfire and got my lunch. That night, I dared myself into sleeping naked under my towel as I would never get another chance like this. As I woke up, I was shocked. My towel was gone. I couldn't find my clothes either. I felt scared as this meant I wasn't alone in the woods. To my luck, my car keys weren't stolen, so I decided to get home. However, since I was staying for one night, I didn't bring any extra clothes. Due to my condition, I had to drive on those barely used roads to avoid any exposure to the public. It was a bumpy ride, but it was worth it. After a few hours, I saw a man in the distance near the road. He tripped and hit his head on a rock. Despite my condition, I knew I needed to stop and give him some help. But as I saw him, I realized he was wearing the same clothes I wore yesterday. I got out to ask if he's okay, but he didn't move. As I got closer, he grabbed my hand and looked at me. He had wide eyes and a huge, terrifying smile. I was more scared than I liked to admit. I quickly got in my car and drove away. I managed to get home by sunset, and it took me a few minutes to get the balls to run to my front door. I have not returned to the lake, and his smile haunted me ever since.
That begins with a C and has a big college that I lived near. I attended a different college than the one I mentioned and made the 20-minute drive from the city to that college. I also worked nights as a pizza delivery man in the city and the surrounding suburbs. One night, I had an order in the town where my college is located, which is a smaller suburban city northwest of my home city. Now, this call occurred during what my coworkers and I refer to as the dead hour, which is just before the shop closed at 1 in the morning. I begrudgingly took the pizzas, got in the car, and plugged the address into the GPS. I noticed that the house was located off on a back road in what looked like a sparsely populated area. Not thinking much of this, I drove up Route 315 to I-270 East and exited. After passing through downtown, the cemetery, and the college, I drove through some subdevelopments and then onto a smaller road where the house was located. The GPS notified me that I had arrived to my destination, but to my surprise, the house was boarded up. I noticed that there was a small shed in the back of the house that had a small window. There was a flickering light in the window. At this point, almost every red flag had gone off in my head, but I knew my hard-ass boss would be pissed if I wimped out on this delivery, so I proceeded towards the shed. As I got closer to the shed, I heard a rustling in the bushes next to the driveway. Then I heard a man whisper,
"Here they come, Billy. 45, 45.
At that point, a man jumped out of the bushes and 2 other men jumped out of the shed. They were carrying knives and were wearing these long robes and white masks. I made it back to the car just in time, but one of the assailants managed to slip my arm. As I escaped, I could see the assailant standing in the middle of the road looking pissed. I probably drove 90 miles per hour on the way back. When I got to the shop, everyone looked shocked. After explaining everything to them, we contacted the police and dispatched a few officers to the house. When they got there, the assailants were gone. They found some drug paraphernalia in the shed, and some ropes and some weird torture equipment.
I was on a road trip with my friend Tom throughout upstate New York. On our second night of driving, we were taking some peaceful back road through the woods because we were tired of the noisy highway. So as we were driving down this narrow, dilapidated road, Tom suddenly really needed to use the bathroom. I asked him if he could hold it, but he said that if he held it any longer, his bladder would explode. So I just sighed and tried to find like a gas station or something. There was nothing to be seen though, so I was thinking about pulling over and letting him piss in the woods, but finally I saw lights cutting through the darkness up ahead. It was a 7-Eleven, thank God. Before I'd even parked the car, Tom flew out the door and raced inside. I realized while waiting in the dark car I was actually hungry, so I pulled out some change from my pocket. It would at least be enough for a bag of crappy Cheetos or something. So then I went inside. As I was walking through the store examining everything on the shelves, I felt a tingly feeling on my neck, like I was being watched. I turned around and saw a bearded man in a yellow suit casually slip into the other aisle. I rolled my eyes, picked up a bag of Cheez-Its, purchased them, and walked out back to my car, looking at the dark woods behind the 7-Eleven. Tom had been gone forever, so I texted him and he told me he was just finishing taking a huge shit, which was classic Tom. I was just crunching on my Cheez-Its when I heard somebody go, "Psst, psst." I quickly looked around but saw nobody. Over here. Finally I spotted a man peeking his head around a tree in the dark woods. His face was all dirty and he had glassy eyes. We stood staring at each other for what seemed like the longest time, until he said, "Come over here. I want to show you something." Hell no. I got in my car and locked the doors, texting Tom to hurry the fuck up. I told him there was a creepy weirdo outside the car and he was all like, "Alright, be right over." Later on, he walked out the doors and climbed into the car, and I hit the gas to get as far away from that fucking place as possible. As we were driving, I looked back one last time in the rearview mirror and saw 3 cloaked, bulky men standing in the trees surrounding the 7-Eleven. Needless to say, I still have no idea what the hell was going on at that place, nor do I ever want to find out.
It was around 5:30 p.m. I was walking in the street to my dormitory since my home is far away from my school. There were only 3 to 5 people passing by that street at that time. While walking, I was texting my boyfriend, asking him if I could come over that night since I have a project to make and my laptop's being an ass. It won't turn on, so I was hoping I could borrow his laptop. And then, when I looked up, there was an old man walking towards me. The street was narrow, so I stopped and moved away to the side to make room for him when he did the same. I nervously laughed and moved to the other side, and he copied me again. This time I felt a bit nervous. Excuse me, I muttered. I tried to get away from him, but he kept blocking my direction. Then he laughed and moved away. I felt relieved. I quickly walked past him, and then he stomped his feet behind me. I got startled, and then he laughed. I thought he was just a crazy old man. I told my boyfriend about it, and he asked me if I was okay, so I told him not to worry. Around 7 p.m., I was at the jeepney stop waiting for a jeepney to arrive because I was going to my boyfriend's apartment since it was 45 minutes and 2 rides away. 30 or 45 minutes later, there was one jeepney with only 5 passengers, so I hopped in. One by one, the passengers got off the jeepney until I was the only one left. "Drop me off by the terminal, please," I said. He didn't say a word, just kept on driving. When we finally got into the terminal, he didn't stop. Just drop me off here, please," I told him again. Then I saw his face in the rearview mirror. It was the crazy man from earlier. I panicked. He was looking at me, smiling. I immediately called my boyfriend, since we don't have 911 here. He wasn't picking up. I didn't know what to do. Should I jump off the Jeep? Then suddenly a group of friends halted the Jeep and he stopped. I immediately got off and ran. I might have looked like a maniac to those teenagers, but I didn't care. I called my boyfriend again, who finally picked up. He had just got off from school and I told him everything. He picked me up where I was, and since then he never let me travel at night.
When I was 18, I only just recently got out of a relationship with a significant other, and I wanted to see other people. I took up online dating on this app that I don't want to name. I never told my parents about my previous relationship, or the guys that I talked to online, so they know nothing about this story. But I still need to tell them one day. Anyway, within a short period of time, I received lots of messages from guys. Most of them were perverts, or just didn't catch my attention, until a cute guy messaged me. I forgot his name, so we'll just call him Justin. Justin was around 23 years old at the time. When he messaged me, he told me how attractive I was and showered me with affection and romantic text messages. I was naive at the time, so I was awed and blushed when he told me all that. We started to get to know each other. He was living in Canada, and I was a Polish girl living in the United States. We had a few hobbies in common, and we both went to college. I was studying to be a police officer to get an associate's degree, and he was going to university to get a bachelor's degree. Then, eventually, his messages started to make me uncomfortable. He said that he preferred white girls over Asian girls, and that he always wanted to have sex with a white girl. He asked me if I was still a virgin, and even though I felt uncomfortable, I said yes. He started talking to me sexually, and I didn't like it, but I complied. Then he asked me if I could visit him sometime in Canada, even though I just met him a couple days ago. Living with my parents in a strict Polish household, I told him that I couldn't because of that. He then argued that I was an adult and I could make my own decisions, which was true, but as a Polish person, you still have to listen to your parents even though you're an adult. Of course, I did tell him that I lived in the United States, but I didn't tell him exactly where I live. He then asked me if I lived in XYZ town in XYZ state. I was shocked when he asked this because I never told him exactly where I lived, and on my profile, I did not give out my location, so I have no idea how he found out about that. I lied to him and said that I didn't, but he said I was lying, and I confessed. Then he asked me for my address, but I refused to give it to him. He got angry and said that everyone gave their address out, which of course I knew wasn't true. I then blocked him, but the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I heard that in my neighborhood, there was a break-in. 2 men broke into a house, but they didn't steal anything. Instead, they might have been looking for someone. My heart jumped when I heard this. Justin was looking for me. A couple houses later, and they gave up. I waited a while later, and I have not heard about anything like this again. I dread to think what might have happened if Justin found the right house in my neighborhood and kidnapped me.
I've been followed by creeps before, and in one case was almost assaulted. I was never truly scared about that type of stuff. I've been through a lot in my life, and I consider myself to be pretty strong. Even when some creep attempted to assault me, I wasn't scared because I knew I was gonna beat his ass, and I did. I never feel threatened unless I get my gut feeling. I know when something bad's gonna happen, or if someone is a shady character, etc. My friends tell me I have some type of sixth sense. I'm not one for superstition, but I also have to agree it gets really weird, and I'm almost always right. One day, I got the worst gut feeling I ever had in my life. I was in my first year of college, living in some very nice apartments. I loved living there. It was a Friday, and I needed to head to the bank before it closed because I forgot to cash in my check beforehand. I left my house, locked the door, and started heading towards my car. Right as I left the hallway of my apartment complex and started walking, a beat-up rusty truck pulled up as if on cue. There were 2 guys inside. One was a pretty big guy with tattoos and looked like he just got out of prison, and the other one was super skinny with glasses. The second I laid my eyes on them, I had my gut feeling kick in. It was worse than usual, and I immediately felt like shit. The big guy was driving and started to tell me things like, "You are so beautiful, come over here, let's talk. You're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen." I didn't want to walk to my car because I didn't want them to know what car I drive, and I didn't want to walk back to my house because I lived on the 1st floor, which is easier to break into, and if they didn't know already where I lived, I wanted to keep them from finding out. So I started walking to the front office of the apartment complex, which was a little far away. I already had my pocket knife out, but hidden in my sweater sleeve. They kept calling out, trailing me as I walked to the office. I kept my eye on them so I knew what they were up to. They eventually asked me to go to a party with them. The big guy said, "We're having a party at 2 a.m. at a friend's house who lives here. Wanna come? We can all hang out beforehand and get to know each other before we go." It was around 3:30 p.m. at the time, just for your information. I ignored them and told them, "No, stop bothering me." They kept trying to persuade me by saying nice things and stuff, and eventually they both said, "If you come with us, we'll give you a free pair of shoes." The skinny guy then leans back and starts digging around the back seat. I stopped to look because I wanted to make sure he wasn't gonna grab a gun or duct tape or some shit like that. I was a good few feet away from the truck and took a running position just in case. He pulls out a dark blue suitcase from the back seat and opens it. Inside there are maybe 100 different pairs of shoes. The sizing ranged from a small pink Dora the Explorer shoe to an adult-sized woman's stilettos. That's the moment where my gut feeling went into a frenzy. My knees became so weak I threw up on the spot. I've never felt so sick and felt so disgusted in my entire life. I felt pure evil. I screamed no, and they became extremely angry and began to get out of the car. I booked it. In the street, my neighbor's little kids were playing outside. I snatched them up and ran all the way to the front office. No way I was gonna leave these little kids behind with some fucking freaks. The minute we got there, I told the front office, and they called the cops, and I called the kid's mother. I told them that her kids were with me and not to leave the house in case they were still out there. I didn't want them to find out where she lived either. After that, for the next few days, I was terrified to leave my house. So terrified I had my friend come and stay with me for about a week. On the 4th day, we were getting ready to leave to go get food. And while I was locking the door, my friend said, "That's a shitty looking truck." I turned around, and it was those guys in the truck right in front of my house. We ran back inside. Apparently they had been stalking out my place for a while. They were never caught, and I never saw them again after the apartments cracked down on security. I learned about serial killers in school and found out some take trophies of their victims. I always thought back and wondered, what if all those shoes were trophies? Needless to say, I no longer live there.
When I was 17, I didn't have a driver's license. Most of the time I walked or hitchhiked. There was this one night. There weren't that many cars on the road, and it was very cold. And this man pulled over. When the guy pulled over, I took a good look at the guy and figured I could take him if he tried anything. He was on the slender side and had a strange frailness about him, even though he looked healthy enough. I got into the car after we agreed on the destination. We exchanged names and I warmed my fingers off in front of the heating group. He spoke quietly, asking a few questions along the lines of, was I local and how did I like living there? He said he only been here for a few months, but found it beautiful and hoped he could find happiness there. That comment struck me as a little odd, but I brushed it off. It began to snow and the road quickly got slippery. So he slowed and he kept his eyes straight out the windshield, driving silently. I was okay with that, as small talk was never my forte. About 10 minutes later, I noticed the car near the intersection we were approaching seemed to be sliding, so I said, "Watch out." He immediately hit the gas, shooting through the intersection and burst out with, "Don't ever scream at me." Needless to say, I was taken aback. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here and I can get there." He didn't seem to hear me. So I said, "Richard, did you hear me? I said you can pull over here and let me out." But no response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now than he did when it started snowing. To say I was scared doesn't seem to cover the depth of the fear that began to rise in me. I didn't know if I should stay quiet or speak, but I was damn sure not going to yell after his outburst. After about a mile, he began to mumble under his breath. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I assumed he was speaking to me. So I said, "What did you say? I couldn't hear you." He began to speak quietly and rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I've told you time and time again, do not yell at me. I don't appreciate it. No, you don't listen, you don't listen." And I was just sitting there looking at him. I was at a complete loss. I didn't know what to say in response or if I should say anything at all. I contemplated just jumping out of the car, but nixed that idea when I realized the door lock was missing. There was just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I started to cry and debate with myself about causing an accident by grabbing the wheel and hoping for the best, when he suddenly looked at me for the first time since I had gotten in the car. He blinked several times, rapidly, then slowed the car, pulling into a gas station. I waited to see if he unlocked the doors, not wanting to say anything to set him off again. After a minute or two, he quietly said, "I think I better let you out of here." And he hit the button to the door locks, and he opened the door. I wasn't about to hesitate, so I jumped out of the car as if I were on fire. I was about to turn and walk into the gas station when he called my name. He looked so damn sad and I hesitated. He apologized, said he was sorry if he had frightened me, that he never would have harmed me. And he asked if I'd be able to get home okay. I said I would, and closed the door. He began to pull out of the gas station, but stopped suddenly. He just sat there for a couple of moments, his head down. I froze, wondering what the hell was up, and was about to run into the gas station, but he opened his window and yelled at me, waving something in his hand, my hat. I left it on his seat. I slowly approached the side of his car, and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, thanks. I watched as he drove off, making sure he was out of sight before moving on so he wouldn't know which direction I was heading. As I walked, I went to put my hat back on, and a piece of paper fell out of it. Folded into a paper was a $100 bill. The paper said, "I'm sorry. Please take a cab and don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't. In fact, it was the last time I ever hitchhiked in my life. Would never, ever do that again.
I was 16 when this happened to me, and it still haunts me to this day. My older brother's friend gave me work of house sitting his rather large house for 2 days, with the pay rate being $100 a night. For the sake of privacy reasons, let's call my brother's friend Nick. $200 was a lot for such a simple task as house sitting, and since I recently sold my PlayStation 3 to save up for a PlayStation 4, the job came as godsend. At around 6 p.m., Nick picked me up and drove me to his house, as it was getting dark out. Once we got there, he told me about the security cameras he had installed in and out of his home. But I didn't have any intentions of staring at any security monitor all night, as I had brought my laptop to pass the time. After some time had passed, I felt hungry and decided to grab something from the fridge. But as I got up to make my way down, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye from the monitor. I sat back down, closing my laptop and taking a closer look, noticing the movement coming from camera 4. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that it was a silhouette of what appeared to be a man standing outside the house. Within seconds of glancing away from the monitor, the man was gone. At that very moment, I heard glass shatter somewhere downstairs, causing me to immediately look at the cameras, noticing him crawling in through the basement window at an alarming rate. I started to panic, watching him climb the basement stairs with a knife clenched in his hand. I quickly locked the door to my room and dialed 911, explaining everything. I watched the monitor, terrified to see the man on the same floor as mine, desperately opening and closing the doors, looking for anyone to cross his path. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear his now slowed footsteps approach my door as he attempted to open it. Realizing I was in there, he began to shout and pound on the door aggressively, frightening me to the very core. As I sat there shaking, I heard sirens in the distance, steadily getting louder and louder. My fear quickly disappeared as I heard the man run towards the stairs, attempting to escape his fate, when I heard the front door slam open, accompanied by somebody yelling,
"Police! Put your hands in the air!"
Moments later, I walked downstairs and saw the intruder in a pair of handcuffs being escorted to the police cruiser. I thanked one of the officers and called Nick, explaining everything to him. After about 20 minutes, he picked me up and took me home. But I got no sleep that night. All I could think of was how lucky I was to be alive. And if the cops hadn't shown up when they did, I wouldn't be here to tell this story.